moralambition.org. One thing they can obviously do is they can buy the book, and then that has a couple of benefits. I mean, they have a book, and also that money will go towards the school.
Absolutely. And what we've also done is we've created a program, the so-called Moral Ambition Circles, and that's freely accessible for everyone. So everyone who has this feeling like, yeah, I also feel somewhat stuck in my job, and I also wonder sometimes what's happened to my great ideals and dreams. When I was in college, I still wanted to solve global hunger, but here I am at, I don't know, McKinsey or something. We have lots of people who have joined a so-called Moral Ambition Circle. It's a group of 6 to 8 people who come together for 7 evenings and try to find out, what are my super talents? What are some of the greatest challenges we're currently neglecting? What's the first step I can take? And how can we support one another? How can we hold each other accountable? And it's been pretty cool to see that in Europe, we already have, almost 200 pledges right now of people who, made a pretty significant pledge to either give up their job or to become an intrapreneur, because, that's also sometimes quite valuable.
You mean within the corporate?
Yeah, exactly. That you're a rebel, within a big corporation.
Or you can drive some corporate resources towards something very wholesome.
Yep. So, I'm not married to a specific method, right? There are many tools in the toolkit.
Yeah, I know. It's true. I mean, I gave a graduation speech to Columbia Law School where I went.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I said is look, if you're at that job, it's fine. I'm not asking everyone here to quit your job. But just when the person asks you for help them.
Yep.
And that can be, sometimes channeling corporate resources.
Yeah. I think that the important thing to emphasize, though, is that we are looking for a moral maximum. There are lots of movements out there that are about moral minimums, right? You donate a little bit to charity. You do a little bit of volunteers work. And I'm not against that, right? The whole doing good by doing well attitude. But I think we live in an era of human history right now where just the minimum is not enough anymore.
And so this moral ambition argument you're making, it has multiple facets, and I'd like to try and run down 1 or 2 of them at least. So number 1 is misallocation of human capital. Most people would look at that and say, you can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
And so then the question is what can you do to create awesome alternatives? So most people are just trying to get by.
Yeah.
And so then for them, it's okay, if I can get by a little bit better, then that's a win. And then there are some people that are fortunate where it's I could do a range of things. Yeah. I can survive in different ways. Yeah. So number 1 is misallocation of talent. Number 2 is people doing more and better from within their positions. And there are a lot of people, not a lot, some number of people that are in positions where they could make massive changes that are not making those changes in part because, a lot of it's financial incentives. But I'll just throw an example. The first example that came to my mind, Mark Zuckerberg. Mm-hmm. He could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what, this algorithm, this ad-driven model, not so good. We should definitely not have any thing to do with having teenage girls on any of these platforms. We should be pushing them out. Maybe be doing a lot of wholesome things.
Well, he could lift the whole country out of poverty.
Yeah.
I could get him the CEO of Give Directly on the line, and that's a money pit where you can cost effectively, do an enormous amount of philanthropy and make history.
Yes. So column number 1 is hey, professional choices. Column number 2 is there are a bunch of needle movers who, if they decided to move the needle, things could shift fairly dramatically. Column number 2 is actually a real frustration of mine. Now, you and I are rare birds in that what we've done is we've extricated ourselves from the economic system and said, look, I'm going to create incentives for myself, and I have the resources or the network or whatever to try and energize that direction. And now for something like Forward, which people listening to this or watching this are familiar with, it's look, we're going to try and fix the American political system. It's going to require a lot of resources and whatnot. Feel free to chip in your money and your time. And because some people think it's the right thing to do, which by the way it is the right thing to do, and even now Ezra Klein is saying you kind of need a positive independent political entity to compete in red states where the Democratic name is underwater, which by the way now it's a lot of places. And so you try and galvanize resources and create your own market. And that's the place you're in right now, where like you are going to folks and saying, hey, the School for Moral Ambition is a great idea. You should fund it. There's a better use of your resources than whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts I have about this. So I'd love to share my grant theory of how we're going to change the system and change also the incentives, because you're very right that the current incentives are pushing people in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So first, I'd like to double down on just how extraordinary the waste of talent that is.
For sure.
What's going on. So take a university like Harvard. 45% of Harvard graduates go into consultancy or finance.
Yep.
I think about 20% into tech. Some of those do great things, but many of them end up building, pretty silly startups, in my view. So that is an enormous waste of talent. We're talking about, I'm not saying like Harvard is some kind of pure meritocracy. I mean, 1 in 6 come from the richest 1%.
You could slot in any of 20 schools in there.
But many of these people go on and do great things, and they don't. Now, the question is, why don't they do it? Most people would say it's all about the money. And sure, that does play a role.
Well, it's the incentive structure.
I would say, though, that one of the more important things is how we have defined success and status.
Agreed.
So there's a survey that's been going on in the US since the late 60s, early 70s, the American Freshman Survey, where students were asked, and are still being asked, what are some of your most important life goals? List them for us. And in the 1960s, about 90% of students said that developing a meaningful philosophy of life was the most important life goal.
Oh, yeah. You used to have late night conversations and read Herman Hesse and things like that.
Yeah, and today that's down to 50%. Back then, only 50% said that becoming financially very well off was their main life goal. Today, that's 80 to 90%. So the numbers have reversed, basically. Now, that is not human nature. That is culture. So as I studied some of these great moral pioneers of the past and some of these great movements, what it dawned on me after a while that they were part of big culture shifts. So this is true for the British abolitionists. It's also true for the US when it moved from the Gilded Era to the Progressive Era. Take someone like Theodore Roosevelt. He was a Harvard graduate, right, who grew up in the Gilded Era. There were other people back then who basically changed their mind or were swept up in this new cultural wave where people were like, you know what? We should redefine what it means to be successful. We've been climbing the wrong ladder all along. Sure, money isn't dirty. I mean, you need capital to make changes in this world. But it's a little bit boring, to be chasing that your whole life, After some point, it's time to think about, as David Brooks would say, what's your second mountain? Like, well, how are you really going to make impact and build a legacy that actually matters? So some of these abolitionists who, financed that movement were very wealthy, had built great companies. The reason we historians still remember them today is not because they were wealthy. I mean, I've met a lot of wealthy people in my life. Quite a few of them are pretty boring, I can assure you. Some of them are exceptional because they have much bigger dreams, much bigger ideals. And yeah, those are the kind of people that we historians love to write about, 100 years later. So that is basically my simple theory of change, that it has to be possible that we change the definition of success once again.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.